This is Gary Swanson interviewing Regina Pachter for the Historic Garment District project sponsored by the Historic Garment District Museum of Kansas City. This is an effort to find out information about the garment industry in Kansas City at its height and subsequent decline. Regina, you are the widow of Meyer J. Pachter, who had his own business, and we want to find out about that. But you specifically, were you born in this country and your parents born in this country?
No, I was born in Russia, in Yekaterinslav, Russia, which is the Ukraine, and my parents were born there.
Uh-huh. And how did you happen to come to Kansas City? Did you have relatives in Kansas City?
My father left Russia when I was 6 weeks old. He was representing a company, a rubber manufacturing company.
That was 6 years old, wasn't it?
6 weeks old.
6 weeks old?
Yes.
Okay.
When I was 6 weeks old, he represented a rubber factory in Russia. He worked for a rubber factory and had an interest in it. The owner of the factory asked for 3 men to volunteer to come to the United States and see how factories are operated here. And my father volunteered with a very dear friend of his and another man that I did not know, but this man remained his friend and settled in Kansas City. So they took a very beautiful trip to come here. Meyer knew more about this trip because my father discussed it with him, and Meyer, being very much interested in world events, loved to hear my father tell him about this beautiful trip because they had money. And he came to California. He came a different route, I don't really know. And he came to California because my mother had a brother there. But my father spoke 5 different languages fluently.
Did he go back to Ukraine then, or
No.
Russia, and bring the family over?
No.
He stayed here, and then brought you your mother. Did you have other
And my mother
siblings?
my mother and I'll tell you a little bit about that, which might, be of interest to people to know how sometimes, people get settled here. And my father was not pleased with my mother's brother and his lifestyle. He was in the restaurant business. Now, in Russia, my mother came from a family of professional people. My mother was a dentist. Her sister was a dentist. Her other sister, the one that reared me because my mother was so busy, was not educated. But she had another sister who was a pediatrician, another sister who was an obstetrician, and another brother who was a pharmacist, and a brother who was an attorney. He was an attorney in Chicago. He came with this first brother, see. My father never met this other brother. He never went to Chicago. But when he went to California, he was very much displeased with what he saw of my uncle. And he wrote a letter in a Jewish Forward, which is the Jewish paper. And he said he remembered taking some of his relatives to the train station when they were leaving Yekaterinslav. And he remembered that they settled somewhere in Missouri. And there was one man, and he said, "I know they're my relatives. Can you please write me if you read this?" Well, we had one man here, it was cousin, is Ben Cohn, and Ben wrote him and said, "We're in Kansas City, Missouri. Come." And he was delighted because he knew all of them. They were very close in Russia. So he came to Kansas City, And he was pleased with knowing that the whole family, most of the whole family was here.
What year did he come to Kansas
He
City?
came to Kansas City, well, he came in 1915. I was 6
1915,
weeks old.
because you
and
were
he
just
was-
born.
And he came here in
And when did your mother and your sisters and brothers come over?
My mother only had me. I was the first child. They were married, and I was 6 weeks old.
Mhm.
Now my mother was a dentist, I told you, and my father had a degree in business administration, and he was within bicycle ride of my mother's school. She went to school in Kharkov, which was very well known as a dental school, and she was very, very bright. So my mother asked her Latin teacher, you have to take Latin, and you have to have a smattering of knowledge in medicine when you're in Russia, if you're going to be a dentist, because they know there in Russia that part of your problem with your teeth have to do with your physical well-being or your physical condition. So my mother asked her Latin teacher if the name Regina is acceptable in the United States. And my mother said she told her, I will look this up and I'll let you know. She came back and she said, yes, that's a name that can be accepted, because my mother read and knew that it meant queen. And I was the first girl born in my father's brothers. He had many brothers, and he had one sister that I know about that perished, Anyway, so I had no Jewish name. My mother I didn't even know about Judaism. We did not practice Judaism.
What was your maiden name? What was your name?
Entin, E-N-T-I-N.
E-N-T-I-N.
My
Yeah.
mother was Dr. Sarah Walowski, Entin, E-N-T-I-N. So we lived there in Russia because the war broke out and the Bolshevik regime came in, which was very, very awful for us. There were times when we were not real sure that we would come out alive from all of the atrocities that we endured. But the other times it was very nice. I have good memories.
But you were only 6 weeks old when you came over.
But he came over. But then when my mother had to finish. She had 1 semester.
Okay.
So she moved with me out of the apartment that my parents had. She moved with me to her parents' home. My grandfather was in the lumber business, and he had a large, it was a complex. He built it. So he built my mother an office in the front of it, in front of the
Okay.
complex.
So when did you and your mother come over?
My mother and I came over in 1921.
And when you were 6 years old, what was your first address in Kansas City? Do you remember?
Yes, it was 2500 Olive. Well, let me tell you, my mother got a letter from my father that he was working for the Commerce Trust Company. Well, he just told her bank. And he said he was in the Foreign Exchange Division. And he was very pleased with his position. And my mother was delighted to know that he would be in a position that he had been trained, to be in.
Mm-hmm.
But when we arrived here on Labor Day, the Strausses, Anna and Harry Strauss, you've heard of the Strauss family, they picked us up at the Union Station. And when they picked us up, my first time I ever met my father, and the man that he came over with, they came 2 years before. My father took my mother, and first thing, we were passing by 25th and Olive, and my father said, this is my business. And my mother said, it doesn't look like a bank. He says, well, I didn't want to tell you, but he said, I bought this grocery business. My mother she was chagrined. She said, you're in the grocery business? She said, the man in Russia, on our street, down the street, he didn't have an education. He was just a grocerman. Why did you do this? Well, now they just met and hadn't seen each other for 6 years. So all of this tirade, my mother she said, why, in Russian, see, I heard all this commotion. Then we went to, one of the relatives had an open house for the two of us, and my mother was still crying, and so I took my father's clothing and threw it out the window. That was my first introduction to Kansas City, Missouri.
Well, but it soon settled down. And did your father stay in the grocery business?
Yes, and he was very successful.
Uh-huh. Well,
Very successful.
where was his last store before he got out of the grocery business?
$2,500.
And he stayed there all the time?
He stayed there in that store. He died at the age of 51. And
What high school did you graduate from?
Central,
Central High School. What year did you graduate high school?
1932.
1932. Tell us about Meyer now. Was Meyer born in the
Meyer was born here.
United
Kansas
States?
City, Missouri.
Parents who came from Russia also?
Yes, the parents came from Russia.
Okay.
Yes.
And he was born here?
Here.
When was he born? What was it?
He was born on Independence Avenue, I think.
Mm-hmm.
They were there in the I know Jenny's was his place where he used to go for,
Yes.
to eat for lunch because his mother was working, you know.
How many brothers and sisters did Meyer have, do you know?
Just one brother.
One brother.
Julius Pachter.
And
he preceded him in death.
and was he younger or older?
He was younger. He was
Okay.
18 months younger.
And so what did Meyer's daddy do for a living?
My father-in-law was a tailor, very fine tailor, and he worked for Union Clothing Company. And he was there for about 30 years.
Where was Union Clothing Company?
Union Clothing Company was on Grand, 12th and Grand, I believe it was.
And that was a tailoring company to make clothes,
Yes,
tailor-made
they
clothes
sold-
for men.
They sold ready-to-wear clothing. It
Ah,
was
I see.
owned by the Rothschilds, and he worked for them for many,
For many years.
Yes.
Okay, so you graduated Central High School in 1932. Where did Meyer go to high school?
Meyer went to Paseo High School, and he was in the first 4-year graduating class. He was there from 26 to 1930.
And I believe you said earlier the school opened in 26, the first graduating class in 1930.
30.
He was in the first graduating class of the great building up on the hill.
Yes, the beautiful new school.
1930. So did he went down then he went on to college as you
Well,
did?
he was very anxious to get a college degree. He was having a little difficult time. So after graduating from Paseo, he started going to night school. And when I met him, it was 1932, December the 31st, 1932. And I was, Meyer wanted to go so badly to university. I met him in 1930, excuse me. And he was telling me at that time that he was going to go to night school, and he was very much interested in my piano playing. And
Are you sure, Regina,
Yes.
it was your piano playing?
piano playing.
He was interested.
He sat next to me, and my date stood up next to the upright piano, and it was a very strange thing that happened. But anyway, he kept telling me, play this and play that, and all the kids were dancing, my friends were all dancing. And I'd been accustomed to that, So,
And you were a young girl then. If you were born in 15, and this was 1930.
Yes,
15
I was
years
15
old.
years old, and he was 17. See,
So you knew each other. Were both of your families active in Jewish life in Kansas City?
well, my parents were very active in Jewish life, and Meyer's. I didn't know too much about Meyer's family, but his father and mother, yes, they attended services, and they were members of synagogue.
Which synagogue was that?
They
On
were-
Paseo, Beth Shalom? Was that on
Well,
Paseo?
well, we
original?
started at Kehilloth, Israel. Meyer and I did when we were young. I went to Kehilloth, Israel Hebrew school, and Meyer went to I think it's Beth Israel Abraham. I think he went to that school. He where he had his bar mitzvah was down way down on Independence Avenue. It's still there. The edifice is still there. And Meyer, so Meyer told me that he was going to night school. And he said he was going to have to work and earn enough money so he could go away to college. So then in 1932, I went away to University of Missouri. And Meyer enrolled. He found out that he could not do very well with night school, and he decided to go back and start at junior college. And he had three very, very close friends. They used to play bridge together, and they too enrolled. They became very prominent citizens here. And
Who were they?
there were Jack Leifer, Dr. Bill Leifer, Dr. George Aaron. They were all enrolled at the same time at junior college.
Downtown.
That's right. And so Meyer, time passed, a year passed, and I went immediately to Columbia, Missouri. I made high school in 3 years, and I found out later that it was my mother's doing, because she found out that everybody who has half of a brain graduates from high school at the age of 16. I came here when I was 6, and I had to start in kindergarten. In Russia, we do not have a kindergarten. We start right away in first grade. By that time, I could read, write, spell, do everything in Russian.
Play the piano even.
I even had an interest in piano at that time, too, from other things.
So
But
you had
anyway,
to concentrate on
Meyer.
education, and you did.
Well, so I told Meyer told me that he was maybe 1933. I saw him, and he said, I would love to go to the University of Missouri. The other 3 boys are able to go, but I don't have the money. And I said, well, let me tell you something. I'm going to give you some good news. I am the commissar, vice president, vice archon of my sorority. And one of my duties is to plan menus and order food for the sorority girls, 40 girls. So I had 2 men that I ordered from. They were my very dear friends, and they became my very dear friends. And they were members of the Phi Sigma Delta fraternity. I was Phi Sigma Sigma, and we were just a block from each other. So I approached the head one, Ben Mossel, who died in the war, and I said, Ben, you've got to give Meyer Pachter a job. He needs it. He wants to come here, but he would be an asset. He said, what are you talking about? Give him a job. I can't just give anybody a job. I said, you've got to give him a job or you're not going to get any orders.
Aha.
And he said, you're not going to give me the orders? I'm giving you such a good price. Anyway, we had kind of a little discussion about that. And so, so I said, Ben, think about it. And I'm going to give you just this summer because he's got to come in the, in the fall. And Meyer was just desperate to go, to get an opportunity to go. So he called me up. He said, okay. Ben became an attorney here, when the war broke out. He had to go and he was killed. And so I called Meyer and I said, Meyer, you've got a job. He said, doing what? I said, you're going to wait tables and you're going to wash dishes and you're going to fire a furnace, and you're going to earn your room and board. Oh, he was so thrilled. You can't imagine.
Now,
He's going
Regina,
with-
were you sweet on him at the time?
Yes, I was. Yes, I was. I was smitten with him when I first met him. As a matter of fact, I came home from, the girls all talked about Meyer. I never had time. I was busy with my piano and rehearsals, and I played for everything in high school, you know, and I was trying to get through in 3 years, you know, and that would let me graduate and say I was 16, even though I was 16 years and 9 months, you know. I was going to be 17 in September, see?
You both graduated from the University of Missouri. Were you going together while you were both down there?
Well, not not right away. Meyer, he was playing the field. And I was having a good time too. I was having, by that time I already had, you know, other dates.
No, we don't have time to hear all the details here.
I know.
Okay, so anyway, did you both graduate the same year?
Same day, the same day.
What day was that?
June, it's
In,
on there.
in 1934.
1936.
1936, you both graduated from the University of Missouri. And were you going together at that time?
Well,
Not yet?
not regularly, but towards the end, he gave me his fraternity pin.
Ah,
And I'll tell you some very nice thing about him. His BPA school had a tea for the seniors. Now, my school didn't have anything, and no teas or anything. So Meyer invited me to go with him because he gave me his fraternity pin in April. And if I tell you, I stayed up all night writing to everybody and telling them I got his fraternity pin. And I was so glad because that was going to be the cinch. You know, I was going to marry him. That was my commitment to him. And so when I went to the BPA school, I'll never forget, he had me walking in front of him. And I said, well, I don't know the professors. You ought to walk, and then you can introduce me. No, he said, no, you walk first. So I walked first, and the first professor just said, hello, and he greeted me. But the second professor said, you are pinned to him? And I said, yes. And he said, you are so lucky. I said, why? And he said, because I gave the entire class a certain amount of money to play the stock market. He said, Meyer Pachter, the only one in our class that made any money, including me, and he made $10,000 in that year. And I said, oh my goodness, what a prize package I'm going to get, And we went through through the line, and the professors were very nice. Meyer made very respectable grades, but Meyer, in addition to waiting tables and fixing, the dishes and firing the furnace, he was very popular with girls, see? So he went to the sorority houses of the girls that he dated and got jobs there at firing their furnaces.
well, that's closer to the girls.
Oh, yes. And somebody asked me what college he went to, and I said he had a wonderful time at Stevens, all girls school.
Okay, we finally, both of you graduated together on the same day. And did both of you come back to Kansas City to work? And if so, where did Meyer go to work?
Meyer received letters from all of the finest national companies in the country. General Motors, General Electric, and I could go on and on and on for all those countries that were very important in 1936. And don't forget it was the Depression. But he received commitments to work for them. At that time, the BPA boys who were at the University of Missouri, some of them were offered jobs with Bill Pessman as an accountant. Meyer's major was accounting. And so he kept telling me, I got an offer for this company, and they're all out of the city. And I said, in those years, I'm so stupid, you know. I said, I'm not going to be able to leave Kansas City. My parents would just be devastated to have me leave. Can't you find a job in Kansas City? Well, here came a letter from Julius Garrison. He said he was in business, and something with his father, and something happened, I don't know what it was, the business terminated, and that he married Honey Garrison and from Topeka, and he was establishing another factory by the name of Laverne. Laverne was their first cousin, their uncle's daughter, and Julius loved that name, Laverne. He named it Laverne Cloak Company. Now, Mr. Pestman offered the boys $15 a week. Meyer was offered $17.50 with Julius Garrison. So he said to me, he said, I just got this wonderful letter. I think we still have it, you know. And he said, and I'm going to start working for him. I'll learn a business. He used to do some work on Broadway for Line Dawson. And he worked around, but he was going to high school, and Meyer was very ambitious. He used to work for anybody that he could find. He worked for Davidson Furniture Company. And Davidson's Furniture Company were so impressed with him, he offered to work for them without getting paid, so that they would see his qualifications were so wonderful, just in high school. He was so smart. So so he did that. He worked for Davidson's and earned enough money to go through junior college, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And
But,
so
okay, so Julius Garrison
offered him this job. Now, our getting married was contingent upon my getting a job, because $17.50 a week, you know, wasn't very much. So I made applications, of course, to work in my field. My field work was with the Kansas City Provident Association, and that was on 12th and Charlotte, I think, or someplace there. But anyway, that was my field work, and as caseworker. And then I made application to the State Social Security Commission. They were not hiring social workers. They had used up all of their funds, and this was as far as they could go. They couldn't give me a job right away. So I decided that I would do anything so that I could get my feet into the door. And so I decided to work for the National Youth Administration. They had funds which were very, very limited, you know, but they allowed you to be an aide to a social worker. And so I got this job, and immediately I received recognition from the heads, you know, and from the social worker that I worked with, Miss Minnie Stockelbrand. She kept saying, this is the best thing that ever happened to me, to have Regina, you know, working with me. Well, now I wasn't married, and my father said, so when are you going to get married? I said, Meyer said in about 10 years. My father said, 10 years? No way. He said, you give that pin back, take off the pin, and give it back to him. And I didn't want to. But he said, you're not waiting. That's all. I'm through. Get yourself another man. And he said, that's it. So I told Meyer, I said, my parents are not going to let me wait for you to get married in 10 years. I said, you'll have to do it now or we're through. So I got a job. And so then he thought about it, and he said, then I got a job. I was immediately appointed. When the funds opened up, I got my job in September, and that was wonderful. I was offered a job, State Social Security Commission, $20, $80 a month, and he was $70 a month, and $150 a month in those years. That was pretty good, you know. And I was very good in math and all that stuff, and I could handle money very well. And so Meyer, we became engaged on Yom Kippur. You've heard of that. And so he gave me my engagement ring at that time. And I'm not going to tell you all the stories.
Yeah,
about
what day
that.
were you married and where were you married?
December the 20th, 1936, we were married at the Bella Reef Hotel.
Yes, on Armour Boulevard.
Right.
Okay, let's talk about his career now. He started.
Now his career. Meyer continued to work for Julius, and I continued to work
What's the name of Julius's Kerrison's company?
Laverne Cloak Company.
Laverne Cloak.
Laverne Cloak Company.
And what did they manufacture? What did they
Coats
do?
and suits.
Coats and suits.
Ladies' coats and suits.
So he quickly learned that business.
Yes, so he learned of the business. He was the office manager of Laverne Cloak Company. Then time passed. It just kept on going and going, and he was still making his $17.50 a week. In the meantime, almost 5 years, 1941, I decided that we should have a child. I was 25, already almost. So, and my mother kept saying to me, "What are you going to do? Aren't you going to ever have any children?" So I said, "Well, I guess we should, And so I went to the office on June the 9th, 1941, which is now the Webster School, and Webster House that Shirley Hellsberg converted into this magnificent art place.
What's the address on that?
It's 17th and Wyandotte. And so I went there, that was where my office. It started in the juvenile court building down on 12th and where that was, I don't know, the lower level. Then we moved to 17th and Wyandotte in this old Webster School. And we didn't have an elevator, and we had to run the steps, and I had to have, I had a caseload of 425. Well, Brenda was born. I left the office on June the 9th, and she was born June the 11th. And I never went back to the office. And she had a very hard beginning. It was not easy. And my mother was terribly upset with me because I worked up until the very end, and she was 5 weeks premature and all that.
And meanwhile, Meyer was still
Meantime,
$17.50
Meyer
a
was
week.
still working for Julius. And then Julius, I don't have to tell you about Julius's business, but he merged with Lewis Walter. And when they merged, Lewis Walter had a cousin who was in charge of the office. Now, when Meyer worked for Julius Kerrison, he put in a marvelous system in the office of billings and accounts receivables and all of this stuff. It was wonderful. He learned how to do it in school, and he incorporated it in the garment business for Julius. When Lewis Walter offered Julius to come in with him, Julius had a wonderful group of salespeople. They told Meyer that they have a cousin. Their cousin was running the office for Meyer to run the shipping department. Meyer was devastated. Then he thought about it, and he thought about it, and he thought, in his mind, he was thinking, one of these days I'm going to have my own company. I'll learn another facet of the garment industry. I'll say yes. So Meyer took over the shipping department, and he put in a marvelous, marvelous shipping department. I think anyone in the industry at that time can attest to it. And so then Uncle Louis, his uncle, told this other man, that he really finds that Meyer would be of great benefit to the company, And he just couldn't, and Meyer was helping him with the office. He was doing everything. So he said, I think what I'm going to do, this man said to him, I find that I'm not as important to you as Meyer, but they're cousins, see. And he said, so I'll relinquish my position here and let Meyer take over. So Meyer then took over the Lewis Walter Company office, but he already had a wonderful system in the shipping department. Now he's learned a lot about the business. Well, in the meantime, men were coming in from New York. Perlman came in, and he said he was impressed with the way the office was operated and way the shipping department was. He said, who in the world is doing all of this? And he said, my nephew, Meyer Pachter. In the meantime, he was telling the people in New York, praising Meyer of Kansas City. So the different men came from into Kansas City from New York and wanted to go in business with Meyer. He didn't know them from Adam. He brought them to my father. And my father said to him, Meyer, I don't know these people. You know, New York you have to trust these people, and I don't find them to be trustworthy. I think they'll probably go in business with you, and they may not be the kind of a person that you would want to be in business with. Meyer was very honest. I could tell you stories about his honesty that you wouldn't believe, but that's the way he was. You tell him, something, and he'll immediately give you the right answer. He's not going to think about how in the world can I misconstrue this so that they would believe me and it isn't right. He wasn't that way. So my father said to him, and he loved Meyer, and he, as much as he, told me that I couldn't marry him because he was going to take so long in making the kind of a living that he thought I was accustomed to. And then he said, I love him with my heart. And he said I would do anything for him. And he was qualified to do it. He was financially secure. So he said, Meyer, I tell you what you do. You take your father and you take your brother, and I will back you. And I will make sure that you'll go in business. Whatever you need, I can do it. So Meyer he was so happy to hear that. And Uncle Louis offered him a wonderful job, permanent job he wanted him to be under contract with him. So Meyer came home to me and he said, Uncle Louis is offering me a good job, plenty of money. And he said, but you know what? I'm going to quit, and I'm going to start my own factory. In the meantime, this was February.
What year?
It was 1942, my father died. He was 51. He died, and he had been ill, and so Meyer kept thinking that, well, what are we going to do? But we had money saved up, because if I made $5, I saved up $2.50. I was very good about that. I didn't have to flaunt anything. What do I care? But as long as I was comfortable, and I saved, and I we had money to start out. So he approached his brother. He remembered what my father said, that he would be happy to help him. And my mother, he didn't want to ask my mother for any money, but we had money. So he approached his brother Julius, and thinking, well, Julius was a cutter. He was working days and nights, and he was already married, and so he said, Julius, we had dinner with him one night, and he said, Julius, would you like to go in business with me? And Julius couldn't make a decision on his own, and he said he didn't have any money, to invest, all that stuff. And he walked out of the car and he said, I don't want to be the richest man on the cemetery. And he said, what do you want to be, the poorest? And Eileen stayed in the car for another 5 or 10 minutes. Now, and she said, I'll talk with him. We'll see what we can do. Anyway, they were going to be able to scrape up a little money, you know, so that they could go at least into the business. Meyer said to me, I cannot take my father. My father's making a decent salary. He's been with Union Clothing Company 30 years. Until I can afford to pay him the salary that he's getting and Union Clothing Company, he said, then I'm not going to offer him a job. It'll take a while. Well, Meyer was, he already, well, at one point, do you want me to tell you, Julius and Louis approached Meyer and said they would like to open a half-size house. And they would want to put Meyer in this manufacturing half-size clothing. And Meyer listened. He said, would you put out, this is before, would you put out, make plans, set out a plan for a factory? And Meyer did. He worked on that very hard. He was still making very little money, you know. So he said, and now this is 1945. By that time, Brenda was 4 years old, and I had Elliot. And Elliot, Julius Garrison came and said, you know, my brother's coming in from the war. Leon was in the war at the time. And he said, my mother, should I put all this on? Yeah. My mother wants this factory that that's going to be open for Leon. And Julius came and told Meyer the sad news that they couldn't open a factory for him. That has to go to Leon. And Louis wanted Meyer to be in a factory with his son Martin. And so Leon, he said, now this factory is going to have to go to Leon and Martin. Now they didn't get along too well, you know, but so Meyer, he said, I hope you get the blueprints for Leon. Meyer said, yeah, I'm through with them. You can have them. And that's when he said to me, I'm not going with them anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm through.
Okay, so did
so
Meyer's brother join with him in the venture to begin Pachter Garment Company?
With him. And
when did Pachter Garment Company begin?
That's 1945. I was feeding my son, Elliot, and Meyer was sitting and he was writing. He drew up his own blueprints, and he was already negotiating with place 533 Delaware to open up a factory there. He had already gone there and talked with them, and he knew he was going to go in there. So he was drawing up his own blueprints for his own factory, and he said, and wanted to know a name. So he said it's going to be Pachter Garment Company, but he said the name of the product. He said, what will rhyme with the well-dressed woman will say? And I said, Marce. He said, that's too long. I said, I don't mean Marce, enfant de la Paris. He said, I said, Meyer, just M-A-R-C with the hyphen. That's it.
Marce, M-A-R-C-E.
With the hyphen, Marce. He said, that's it, we got it. So right there, I'm feeding Elliot, he's in the high chair, and we got the name, see? And it didn't matter to Julius Pachter what we decided on. Sure. He would be in agreement.
So when the factory opened, down at 533 Delaware, and how many sewing machines did you have, and what was the product line?
Now that I do not know.
What was the product line though? Ladies' coats and suits?
Yes, Marce, Pachter Garment Company. It's there, you can see on whatever that name is, you know, Pachter Garment Company, Marce, coats and suits.
Mm-hmm. Now, did Julius have a an equal ownership?
Yes.
Okay.
Now, 6 months after we were in business, Julius Pachter went up to Lewis Walter for something. I don't know what it was. Well, first of all, I want to tell you, when Meyer first opened up the business, it was bad times. He was having trouble getting lining. And I got a letter from him where he said, I saved it. He said, I feel like I just want to, I want to fall out of this big building. I cannot get a piece of lining. In the meantime, I found out that Arthur Leonard, was selling linings, and they lived in the plaza at the Casaloma. And my sister was friendly with Mr. Leonard, his wife, and so she said to me, why did he go to New York for linings when Arthur Leonard is here and he sells linings? And so I called him, and he said, tell Meyer to come back. I'll fix him up. When I called Meyer and I told him that Arthur Leonard said, you'll get linings, he was elated. Oh my gosh, he couldn't believe I did it from here, Arthur Leonard supplied him with all the linings he needed, and he had enough, he was able to get started, you see. So now they're in business of 6 months. And in 6 months' time, they made back a third of their investment. Now this is all you can, if you want to go in and go into the records, which are probably somewhere, of businesses records, you can see how they started, the money that they had in it, and how they made it back, did very well.
Mm-hmm.
Paid the bills and made a third of their investment. So
Who's went on the road to sell? Did they hire two or three salesmen?
They had a few salesmen, sure. They had
two salesmen on the road. How many lines did they have? A spring line and a fall line?
Oh yes, spring line and the fall line, and then Meyer. Then they started expanding. Anyway, Julius Pachter went up to Lewis Walter for something, maybe, I don't know. And he came back. He says, "Say, listen, Meyer, Louis wants to merge with us. He wants us to merge with him, with one stipulation. We changed the name, and he wants a half-size coat and suit. Youth Craft was going to be juniors, and we were going to be half-size coats and suits. Well, Meyer started with all sizes, but he did have the half-size. He was very good in that. And Meyer had a wonderful designer at that time, Mr. Circola. And Mr. Circola, well, I'll tell you about that in a minute. Meyer decided that, so Julius came and told him. Meyer said, "What are you talking about? He wants to change the name. I worked like a dog to build up this name, and he wants to change it? No way. I tell you what you do, Julius. You want to be with them. You go, I'll buy you out, and you go and you work with Louis and Julius. I'm not going to go on that stipulation. I've already established a good reputation. In 6 months, I'm not going to give it up." So he went back, and he told him that Meyer will not go with you under those conditions. He wants the name Pachter Garment Company, he wants Marce, and he wants to leave it that way. If you want it different, you just will not get us. We're not going with you. So he told Meyer when he came back that this is the way it's going to be, and they agreed to leave this as Pachter Garment Company, Marce Coats and Suits. And he said, "Louis and I will be half partners of you and Julius." And Meyer made Julius a full partner at that time. So now we're with Julius. And he said, another thing he told Julius Pachter, he said, I can make you in 5 years what it would take you 10 years, or I forgot what the difference was, but anyway, something. I can make you grow big very quickly, because he said you have everything going for you, and you know what you're doing, and he said, and I can build your business up fast, because he had a wonderful reputation. He was wonderful to Meyer, and he loved Meyer. When he had to go, he never took a plane. Louis didn't.
What was Louis's last name?
Walter.
Okay, Louis Walter.
And
Okay.
Company.
So the Louis Walter and the Pachter Garment Company merged, but with the retaining the name Pachter Garment Company, and
Louis Walter and Company had their name, and we had our name.
But it was one company.
But we were one company with two different names.
And Meyer and
his brother
Meyer and Louis Walter were equal partners.
And Julius, and well, all four of them were equal partners
In this
one
merged business.
In the Pachter Garment Company.
Yes.
Not Louis Walter.
Yes, in Pachter Garment Company.
Nothing to do with Louis Walter.
There wasn't any more Louis Walter. It was part of Pachter, but they kept the name.
Right. But we never participated in any of the money of Louis Walter. But Louis Walter was where they were able to get money from us. They were our partners. We were not their partners. So that's the way that went.
But you were one company.
Two companies.
Two companies. When you say they merge, I guess I'm a little confused.
Louis Walter and Company was a separate entity.
Yes.
Louis Walter bought an interest
Okay.
in Pachter Garment Company. A full interest.
So they kept their operation, and you had the Pachter Garment
That's
Company.
right. Kept.
Of which Louis Walter was a partner.
Louis and Julius were partners.
Yes. So how did business go then?
Right, and Leon was a partner, was an owner with Martin Walter of Youthcraft.
Mm-hmm.
They named it Youthcraft. See?
But that
so
wasn't
now
any-
we have three companies, and at one time we did something together. I forgot what it was, but it was the three companies that operated together.
When you said they operated together, they were in the same building, using the same operators?
No, each one had their own building.
Same salesman?
No.
Everything was different.
Everybody had their own. Louis Walter had his own, we had our own, and Youthcraft
Then
had.
what was the advantage of being merged?
Well, we had unlimited credit. That was it. Unlimited credit with Louis Walter, because he was well established and he was fine. Meyer could go in New York and get whatever he wanted.
Yeah. So how did things go then from 1945 for the Pachter Garment Company?
Everything went well. Our company thrived, and when Leon got started, he didn't have a designer, and he asked Meyer if he could borrow his designer. Meyer said, okay. If he wants to work for you at night, he did. He said, if he wants to work for you and moonlight with you, he said, it's up to him. This is not for me to say. So he approached him, and Mr. Circola was very nice. He helped Leon in designing clothing for Youthcraft. And he worked for Meyer during the day.
Mm-hmm.
I have a picture of that somewhere, of Mr. Circola working for Meyer. They loved it. And, so then Meyer decided, after 15 years, he just decided that it was time to close up our business.
And that would have been from 45, 15 years would have been 60.
60.
All right.
We decided to close up our
Business was good, but
was good.
but then it began to tail off as conditions changed.
Well,
Is that right?
Then he came, he said, you know what? We were coming in from New York when he made the decision in New York. We had a very good season and things were going very well. And he said, but I'm not going to work this hard. I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I'm going to give it up. I'm going to close up while we've got money. I want to take the money. We're going to divide it between the two of us, and that's it.
The two of us, Julius and
Meyer.
Meyer. Is that what
So-
you did?
Well, but by that time, Louis Walter died, and he was bought, and he had got out of our business, and so did Julius Carrison. See, Louis died, and that's another story that I don't want to delve on. And then, so Meyer told his brother, he said, let's close up. He said, it's to the point where we have to close. So Meyer stayed home for maybe about a year. He wasn't doing anything but playing cards and, messing around, golf. And his employees, I want this on record, his former employees, and I think, Ann, you can back me up on that, how well he was thought of by his employees.
Yeah.
They called constantly. They said, Meyer, why don't you open up another factory? They were dispersed among all the factories, and they were not as happy as they were working for him. He was so good to them, and Ann can back me up on it. I'm not telling you anything.
Sure. So what
that
did he do
isn't
then?
right.
Did
But
he do
I'm trying
that?
to tell you something that you will know. He was called every day. Somebody called. We'll work for nothing, they said. We'll work for nothing. And here he had Randy. He adored Randy. Randy was wonderful. Yes.
Randy was the designer.
Is his designer. He was wonderful. Meyer just loved him. As a matter of fact, he worked with him on a Saturday and Randy collapsed at the table. And they found out that he had a terrible, I forgot what it was that he had, Randy. But anyway, we rushed him to the hospital, and Meyer called me and said, they're rushing Randy, he has to have emergency surgery. And when I came to the hospital, I saw that they put the wrong name on his leg, and they were going to operate for something else. And I said, my gosh, this is Randy Randazzo. You've got the wrong person. And so he attributes his life to both Meyer and me. And he's going to be 80 his next birthday.
Randy Randazzo.
Yes.
Does he still live here in Kansas City?
No. He lives in California.
Mm-hmm.
But he has been, when he finally found us, he's been sending me clothing. He bought William Pearson. Well, he went to Dallas, Texas first, and he opened up a factory there.
After you closed.
And yes, and then, but anyway, what I want to tell you about Meyer, he was urged by the employees to open up. They would work for nothing just to help him. Meyer said, I'll never do that. I want to work with you. Okay, he said, I'll open up another factory. So then he opened up a smaller factory, and
This would have been in 1960?
60, well, yes, and, in that same, about a year later,
Yes.
Well, when Julius Pachter got word of the fact that he was opening up another factory, he was not very happy. I'm going to open up this factory. I'm going to go to Commercial National Bank, and I'm going to get a loan, and I'm going to start in business again. So just give it to him. And that's the way that started again. Then Julius Carrison approached him again. And he said, Meyer, would you merge with me, come and merge with me? And he said, but Meyer said, look, I've already sold this line. He said, and I've got accounts receivable, I've got to ship the stuff out or I'll get cancellations. So he said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Well, I guess I don't know what happened, but the garments stayed and Meyer got cancellations. And we owed all this money to Commercial National Bank.
So
And
Pachter
the
Garment
Julius-
Company was pretty 15-year period as Pachter Garment Company.
Went well. Everything went well. We came out with money. So now I paid off the bill. In the meantime, Meyer was floundering. After Julius Carrison decided that he was going to pick up his tools and go to California, then Meyer was playing cards again, and in the meantime, he had a friend who, very dear friend, who opened up a car wash on Broadway. No, on Paseo, and he used to come and talk to Meyer about how wonderful his business was and all that, and asked Meyer to invest with him. So Meyer made an investment in this car wash business. And then another friend of ours was going to give up the car wash on Broadway. Now Meyer never knew one thing about car wash business, but he was so bright, he started to study it, and he made a wonderful business out of that Mr. Gleam car wash. And they interviewed him in the in halls, when you drive in to go into the parking lot. They stopped him. They told him, "We want to interview you on radio and television." And they had Meyer telling him what kind of suds he used and what he did, to make this such a good business. And his fraternity brothers used to come in to Broadway, and they hated to see Meyer work so hard. They just hated it because they knew Meyer from, they grew up with him. And so they used, Bill Lyford, the doctor, if he was on his way down, to Menora or down, someplace, he used to park his car and came out and start pumping gas and help Meyer. Jack did the same thing, and George Aaron did the same thing. His fraternity brothers were wonderful. They came in and they helped him.
So how long did you stay in the car wash business?
Well, he got out of the car wash business. He was in it, what was it, maybe 19, I don't remember, maybe in the 70s, I guess he was. And then he said, and then an interesting thing happened. Again, he retired. I'll tell you why he retired. J.C. Nichols wanted him to buy the land, and they wanted the car wash there, but they wanted him to buy the land, the ground for the car wash. That's the way they were going to start selling their business. Lynn Danahauer was at that time at the head of it, and he approached Meyer and said, "Meyer, you're going to have to do something different. You can't just lease the place from us. You're going to have to buy the land." Mr. Nutter owned this place here, and he had another place over. He started to buy another place. In the meantime, the car wash was in the middle. So Meyer said, "You know what? I'm not going to own the land. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to close up the car wash. Maybe Nutter will buy it from you, because I'm not going to. I don't want to be bothered with it. What am I going to do with a piece of land?" And he said, "I'm really getting tired, and it is a hard business." So he got out of it, and then they did sell it to Nutter. Now he opened up one place here and another part of his business on the other side of this property. And Meyer retired, and Al Lighton from Wolf Brothers was in the same locker place with Meyer, a couple lockers down at Oakwood Country Club. We were members there. You see that there. So anyway, Al Lighton said, "What are you doing with yourself these days?" Meyer said, "What am I doing? You see what I'm doing. I'm shuffling cards. I'm playing golf. I'm schmoozing with the men. What can I do?" He said, "I'm, getting up there." So he said, "Why don't you come and work for me?" Meyer said, "Doing what?" He said, "You can sell men's coats and suits." So he said, "Oh, I've never done that." He said, "I've never been in retail." He said, "Well, you should go with," and he said, "Come, Meyer, you come down there and work for me." He said, he said, "Just from you?" He said, "I'm going to call the manager of the one in the plaza." was it the Plaza first? Or Ward Parkway. I think you're Ward Parkway. He said, I'm going to call him and I'm going to tell him to put you on. You don't have to sign any papers or anything. He said, you just come and work there. He worked there, and I've got the papers to show you. He was top salesman, and when they had to alter the clothing, he explained to those tailors how. I wanted to tell you about his father. I forgot to tell you. He showed them exactly how to press the garments so that they would look like they had just been sent in from the factory after alteration. And he explained fabrics to them, and you can't put any more pressure on it. He explained everything. He was so good, and they just loved having him there. He was everybody liked him, and after they get through with the suits and whatever, he used to take him over and introduce him to the person selling ties and shirts, and he was having a ball, and he loved being with all the people, and it just gave him a new life. He was just so thrilled, and he didn't work every day, but the kids had to have dates, in the evening. So Meyer used to work a lot at night because he thought, well, I don't care. What do I care? I can stay home. I was busy running around for the community, so he could work at night, and he used to come home at 9:30, when the store closed, or 10 o'clock, whatever it was, and he loved that part of his business. I think he was with them for about 5 years. He was just having a ball, and I was glad for Meyer. But I wanted to tell you about his father. After Meyer was in business a certain length of time, business was growing pretty good and was doing very well. He offered his father a job there, Leave Union Clothing Company, and he started him with more money than he was making at Union Clothing Company for 30 years. Then his father died when he was 60. He had been, I think he had a prostate condition, and they came in for something that they had to correct. It was a corrective surgery, and that was his very dear friend who operated on him, and he never made it. They even had a machine flown in from another city, that would perhaps help him with the blood so that it would start working better for him. But he died in the business, and on his deathbed, he begged Meyer to be sure to take care of everybody connected with him. He said, Meyer, I can trust you. Meyer came home, he was in tears. He said, my father put a big burden on me to be sure to take care of the family, because he knew I was the only one that could do it.
That is a great testimony to
Yeah.
Meyer and his father.
Yes.
So when Meyer got through with Wolf Brothers,
Well,
he
let me
finally
tell
said,
you
I'm not
that-
going to work anymore?
Well, let me tell you the sad part.
Tell me about Meyer.
Meyer was going to work at Wolf Brothers on a Sunday morning, and he went out to the car, and he came back in. He was just dressed beautifully. He came back in, and he said, honey, I've got a terrible headache. I think I need medical attention. Something is wrong with my head. So I said, but I didn't know what to do. He said, I said, let me call Elliot and have him come right over and take you to the hospital. Why wasn't I able to take him? I don't know. And so I said, the weather wasn't too great. So, it was my birthday. And it was raining, it was bad weather, and Elliot's wife they were going to give me a luncheon, the girls were. And it was going to be at, I think, I don't remember what, but it was at Oakwood or someplace. Anyway, I was to go to this luncheon, so I said, well, I'll call Elliot, and I'll tell him that you don't feel good. Elliot came right over and took him over to Menora, and I hadn't heard from him and my daughter-in-law at that time with my, so that was 14 years ago. He was, called me, and they said, the girls answered the phone. They came back and said, Regina, Meyer has a massive heart attack, and he's in the hospital, and we don't know what's going to be, but you better get over there. So we just stopped the luncheon, which was in my honor, and we went. I came right to the hospital, and Elliot said, Mom, it's touch and go. He said he had this is what happened to him. And his blood pressure, he couldn't get a hold of Dr. Eisman. He had to have this other doctor who was on duty at that time, it was that weekend. He was on duty, and he said, and Elliot said, they told him that they didn't have a room. And this doctor said, I don't care where you put him. You can put him in the bathroom. He's got to have immediate attention or he's leaving this world. And he said he screamed at them. So he said they immediately rushed him somewhere, and they started working on him, and they've been working on him, and he said now he's very, very sick. So he said, you just be prepared, whatever will be, can't help it. He's had a very serious heart attack. He said his blood pressure was off the wall. But Meyer was just that way. If he had, he worked for Wolf Brothers. He ran all over. If he could pick up a suit here, he didn't wait for the delivery man to do it. He'd get in his car and he'd run, and he'd do it. He was always very intent on what he was doing, and he did it with his heart and his soul, and always that way. When he was working in the car wash, my mother, I was in New York at the time, and my mother was staying with my youngest daughter, Maureen, and she said, I sure hope your husband has insurance. I said, why? He doesn't. She said, well, something better give. She said, because he's killing himself. He never comes home. He just works. And he said, this is terrible, terrible the way he works. And this is what happened to him. So he had this serious heart attack, and then he never went back to doing anything. He took life easy. He came out of it, and then he survived, and he played cards occasionally. Then he got himself involved in the video program. He decided, then he could start working, volunteering for the synagogue. He got a bright idea that he could tape every important event, plus lectures that the rabbis gave, or anybody. Scholars and residents, came from Abe and Catherine Kaplan. Abe Kaplan from Kaplan. He's going to sponsor one. Every year he's been sponsoring. Meyer loved it. So he used to tape everything. He threw himself into the video business. He never knew much about anything, video, but he learned, and he studied it, and he made a wonderful, he was very successful in it. They've got the video library now in his name, and every one of the jackets, the Rabbi Margulies said, I don't want any jacket leaving this place without Meyer Pachter's name on it, and a whole thing about him. And he was just wonderful. When Brenda was born, he wanted a moving camera. He was always interested in electronics. I'll tell you something else about him. He took courses after he was in business, all kinds of courses, in running the new innovations. We were the first company that had an IBM system put in. She'll tell you. That was, you knew that. Did you?
Yes. Yes.
How did you know?
Because I worked at IBM. I was an IBM salesman.
Oh,
selling
then
that.
you knew that Meyer was the first company.
Yes.
Then Julius Carrison called him. He said, Meyer, would you put an IBM system in my factory, Lewis, Walter and Company? Then Leon called and said, well, you did it for my brother. Would you put it in for me? Then Harry Feingold called and said, Frida's jealous. She's talked with all of these people that are working for these companies, and she said, the secretaries and all, and he said, would you put it for me? Well, we never saw Meyer at home. Maureen, my little girl at that time, she had a playmate, Roxy, who lived across the street on 70th Street. She came home one day and she said, Roxy just told me her daddy will never come home. He hasn't been home a long time because he's divorced. He left his mother and he left Roxy and they lived there by themselves. She said, and I told Roxy that my mother and daddy are divorced because he's never come home. And so she said, my mother was sitting there and we were going to have dinner together. So I said, Maureen, we're not divorced. Why did you tell Roxy's mother? Baker, that was her last name. I said, why'd you tell Mrs. Baker that we're divorced? Well, she said, I told her the same thing happened to me. It's happening to Roxy. My father left us. Mm-hmm. So I called Meyer on the phone, and he was working on Harry Feingold's IBM. And so I told him, I said, you know, Maureen told the neighbors that we were divorced because she never saw you. So will you please talk with her and tell her we haven't gotten divorced yet. We're just a little bit separated for the time being. Then he took a course in time and motion study. After he got through with that course, what do they call him? He's not the instructor on that course told him, can I work for you? Meyer said, you're going to work for me? He said, yes. He said, I just loved having you in the class. And he said, you've done so well. I'd like to work for you in time and motion study. So Meyer hired him, and he worked for him until the business closed down.
That's amazing. When did Meyer pass away?
He passed away in July the 15th, 2003.
Just not quite 2 years.
Just a year and a half. Well,
yes, right.
It was a year in July.
When you look at his business back during that 15-year period of time, which was the heyday of his participation in the garment industry. He had been in it before, but that was a heyday, his own business. Do you remember any figures about how big the business was? I mean, how many units you might have shipped, or what the dollar volume might have been?
It was an over $1 million a year business. Mm-hmm. That I know.
Which back then was quite a bit.
It was what?
I see that was a lot of money back then.
Yes.
At $2 a garment or $5.
It was very
$10.
successful.
And it was coats and suits only?
Coats and suits.
Ladies' coats and suits. Would you say it was it toward the high end of the price line or medium priced?
Medium to better.
I think you've got one of the garments here. We want to get a. I'll just move over and. No, I can see it right there. That's a lady's suit, one of the Pachter Garment Company's ladies' suit, and it did have the Marce brand in it.
Yes, I think so.
Somewhere. Very nice piece of goods.
Yes, here's the label. Marce.
Yeah, let me focus in on that. As a Marce original. Well, that is right. Very, very nice. You've also got an advertisement hanging here on the wall that a model was modeling one of Marce's garments. So here's an advertisement for the Pachter Garment Company, 311 West 8th Street, Kansas City, Missouri, and a beautiful model. Who is that beautiful model?
Well, that's me, and it was just a one-time deal. He had several uh, advertising agencies, and one of them was Ben Allmeyer, who recently died. His wife and I were friends. She worked, his sister, Eleanor Kamen. She was Elmer Allmeyer. She was Eleanor Fox, and then she worked for her brother. And she called me one day and she said, Meyer would like to put the garments in the in fashion magazines. Well, I knew Eleanor from my philanthropic work with Hadassah and Federation and all those things, And I said, oh, that's very nice. I can't remember what I said, but it never dawned on me that she would want me to come and model this garment, She said, well, I want you to be the model. I said, model? I've never done anything like this. I said, I can't understand that. Don't you have somebody that professional that you could, use? She said, well, we discussed it and we decided we could use you. So, I said, I can't believe it. I said, what am I supposed to do? I said, does Meyer know that this is your idea? She said, yes, he knows. I told him. And he said, well, see what it looks like. If it comes out okay, we'll use it. If not, we'll go further. So I came down on Broadway, and in some place where she took me for this photo, to take this photograph, and I came in, she said, bring a purse and bring a couple of hats. It was very easy for me to get hats because in those years I had hats to match everything I had, So I brought down a purse. Well, I carried a big purse. I was so busy when I went into the organizations, I had to keep notes and stuff, So I brought in a big bag. She said, oh, I hate that bag. So I said, well, what can we do? She said, I've got a darling bag that's mine, and you use my bag. I brought gloves, and that's my hat. See?
And
so I put this on.
That's the reason your business was so successful.
For the first time. I can't tell you, I never did this in my life. And so Meyer was so thrilled. It came out pretty good. And he said, we'll use it. We'll just use it.
Came out very well. And the three-piece outfit here, the skirt, the jacket, and the coat, retail about $110,
$110.
suggested retail.
Right.
So it gives you an idea of what prices were like back in late 50s, 1960.
Well, it was, in the 50s, right.
Advertisement in the Kansas City Star of some, you see the Marce original up there, and then versatile new three-piece wardrobe, $99. That was an advertisement, I think, for the Jones store. And then, of course, there's one for Harsfeld. So they all carried the Pachter Garment line. And they had some beautiful, well-designed ladies' coats and suits. Here was a garment tag for the Pachter line. It says on it, youthful styling for your figure, Little Women. What sizes did Meyer manufacture ladies' coats and suits in?
Half sizes.
Half sizes.
And then he went into regular size.
Mm-hmm. So
But it started as a half-size suit company.
So
Suit and coat company.
we've got something that'll fit you. That's wonderful. Here's a holiday greeting card sent out by Meyer when his business, when it was in the heyday. You see that they've got the Marce original line, and then here's Meyer. And then Brother Julius. Very, very nice. Do you have any idea what year this might have been sent out? Probably in the 50s sometime, huh?
Yes.
You'd indicated before, one of the reasons that Kansas City was successful as a garment manufacturing center after Chicago had started to going down and in New York had gone down was because the garment manufacturers in Kansas City made fashions for the people in their marketplace, which maybe we'd call Middle America primarily. And what were those fashion statements that that women in the Mid-America wanted that you stayed true to that kept the garment business in Kansas City going longer?
Well, Meyer made a very profound statement that when New York said, raise your skirts, he said, no, we're going to keep it at mid-length. California said, lower the skirts. He said, no, we're going to keep it at mid-length. And that really went over. And because the other skirt lengths went out in perhaps the next season or the second season, but the Kansas City merchants decided to go with the modern trend, which was keep them at mid-length.
That's what your clientele wanted.
Yes.
Well, that's...
And the people were happy because they could either, wear them a little longer if they wanted to lower the hem. They had very fine workmanship, yes. They made deep hems, and they could either lengthen them or they could shorten them.
So it allowed a lot of flexibility for the consumer.
Right.
If they did want to go lower to raise
Right.
it. That's very interesting.
Right.
You've got some wonderful pictures of your family. Let's take a look at them. First, let's get you and Meyer. Regina has told us all about this wonderful man, the love of her life, Meyer Pachter, but we haven't had a chance to see him other than that advertisement. And here they are. And when was this taken roughly? Do you remember?
Might have been about, maybe 5 years ago.
Maybe 5 years ago, okay. And a very handsome couple. We just saw how the Meyer Pachters looked about 5 years ago. Now let's go back almost 67 years. They were married 65 years when Meyer passed away.
No, we were married 66 years.
66 years, I stand corrected. And here they are, a very handsome couple. And she didn't wait 10 years because she threw down the gauntlet and he said, you're right, let's get married. What a beautiful, handsome couple. Married in the Belle Reve Hotel in Kansas City, which was the place at that time on Armour Boulevard for big wedding receptions, weddings, other gatherings. And what was the date of your wedding?
December the 20th, 1936.
December the 20th, 1936.
Right. Okay. Brenda was born June the 11th, 1941. And she was a wonderful, wonderful child always. She was outstanding in everything she did. She graduated from the University of Wisconsin, all straight A's, and she was in all accelerated classes and at Southwest High School and National Honor Society in the junior year.
Just like her mother and father.
No.
Where does she live today?
Now she lives in New York. She was fortunate to get one of the most wonderful men that anybody would ever dream a daughter would be lucky enough to get. And that's Richard Siegler. He's an only child of a very wonderful family. His father was a very prominent attorney in Yonkers, New York, and Richard graduated from Amherst and from Harvard with all the highest honors. And he's a partner in a very prestigious law firm in New York, Struck and Levan.
Well, that is wonderful.
Yes, and they have one daughter.
Well, let's take a look at her.
This daughter is Lauren Siegler Mulheim. She graduated from Princeton, where she met her husband, and she received her PhD from Rutgers, all high honors. And her husband, too, is a very, very fine, wonderful man. He is now Senior Vice President of Disney, and they live in California. And her husband got his MBA from Stanford. They're both very outstanding students, and they have these 3 wonderful children.
Well, who are these 3 wonderful children? Is the oldest is the boy?
Is the boy.
And what is his name?
Henry.
Henry, that's your
Mulheim.
great-grandson.
Son.
And
He's 7 years old.
and who are the other 2 children?
The daughter is Rebecca, and she's 5 years old. And the youngest is going to be 3 on January the 30th, and her name is Allison. And they live in Los Angeles. And my granddaughter has her doctorate, and she's the head of she's the head clinical psychologist of the Women's Reformatory.
Beautiful family. Your granddaughter and great-grandchildren and husband.
Yes, she was very lucky to get such a wonderful husband. He's very lucky to have gotten her. And they met, and with him, he just fell in love with her right away. He took one of the events at Princeton. I went every year to be with my granddaughter at Princeton for 4 years.
And she met him at Princeton, and they
Yes, and-
love at first sight. They got married, and look at that wonderful family they
yes,
have.
and they got married at Princeton.
That's wonderful.
Elliot is my son. He's 59. Brenda's 63. And Elliot is graduated from Arizona State University. He was a very, very fine golfer, and he still is. And he made quite many waves here in Kansas City with his golfing, and also in college and all. He has a degree in business administration.
I believe you have a picture of his 2 children.
Elliot is my son, and he's 59, and he has 2 wonderful children, 14. The son is 14, and the son kind of follows in his father's footsteps.
And what's his name, the son?
His name is Robert, and he's a wonderful golfer too, and a wonderful student. Both of them are wonderful students. And the little girl, she's 12 years old, and she's just a wonderful child. So we're very proud of
That's
these
great.
two.
Is Elliot and do they live here in Kansas City?
They live in Olathe.
Wonderful.
My youngest daughter is Maureen. She's 52, and she got her degree from Warrensburg, Missouri, from the
Central Missouri State?
Central Missouri State University. And she has a degree in early childhood development. And she teaches now at the school on 74th and Broadway. She's been doing this for many years, and she just loves teaching. She's never been married, and she's just a joy. She has a beautiful voice, and during her growing up years and in college, she had 5 leads in 5 shows, and she sang everywhere. She's just been, I love her musical end of it because I did accompany her, and when she participated in many of the programs here and in churches. Marilyn May's mother fell in love with her and had her singing for churches.
That is absolutely wonderful. So you and Meyer, 3 children, 3 grandchildren, 3 great-grandchildren.
That's right. We got in 3s.
Regina took classical piano lessons from the time she was 7 years old till she graduated from college, spending 4 years with a distinguished professor there. And this number she's going to play for us is when the Liberty Memorial down at Pershing Road in Maine, a monument to World War I veterans, was rededicated. And what was the date of rededication?
May of 2002.
May of 2002. She was invited to play, and she did. Go for it. Beautiful. I want to thank you so much for this interview and the time we spent together, and your telling about your husband Meyer and his involvement in the garment manufacturing industry of Kansas City, and your participation as a helpmate at home. Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking me.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I never dreamed that this would happen. So many interesting things are happening to me now that I'm almost on my way out.
You're just getting started. When
Are
will you
you
be
kidding?
90?
I'm very realistic. I
What-
know. Time